this video I'll explain you how you can create a macro. First, let's discuss what a macro is. Macro is an object in Cognos Planning Contributor Administration Console which can be used to run a certain set of steps on an application. So if you want to perform a GTP, you have two options to do that. First, that you can run a manual GTP, or second, you can create a macro of a GTP. Now, what are the advantages of macro? First and foremost advantage is that it makes all the steps happen faster. So if you have certain steps, like first you want to synchronize an application, then you want to run a go to production of that application, then you want to publish all data, you can just create a macro to do that. That macro will contain three steps. First would be synchronize application, second would be a GTP of that application, and third would be to publish that application. Now instead of doing three steps manually, you would have to just create that macro once, and from the next time you can run that macro, and that macro will perform all three steps one after the another. Hope you understand what a macro is and what is the purpose of a macro. Now let's create a macro. As an example, I will create a sync GTP macro, which is quite normal in contributor implementations, where you want to synchronize an application first, save it, and then you perform a go to production process to send these changes to your web application. So let's start with clicking on new. I'll give the macro name as GEC, that is Go Expense Contributor Sync GTP. If I select this option, the step means that it will publish this macro to Cognos Connection. So if a user has access to an application objects, they can directly click on that macro and they can run that macro from Cognos Connection. For now, I do not want to publish this macro to Cognos Connection. I'll click OK. Excuse me. The macro will be created with the name GEC Sync GTP, and then it will provide me an option to add macro steps. A macro consists of a number of steps. At least one step should be there, and you can add multiple steps in that macro. So as I want to first synchronize that application, I will select sync macro step. I'll click OK. Now selecting the synchronize step will provide me an option to set the different options for synchronize macro step. In a moment it will open that options page. Here it is. First step is to write the name of that macro step. Synchronize is quite fine for now. Then on which application do I want to perform this synchronize? Now the box that comes that lets you select application name. As I have only one application in my planning administration domain, I have only one application and I want to run the synchronize step for this application. I'll select this application. Next step, as it explains itself, that use library name already specified in the application, or if I want to, I can give a certain library name to which the application should be synchronized. So I'll use the first option. I'll also select this save changes if destructive. Destructive synchronization is when some objects have been deleted or there is a possibility of some data loss during the synchronization. So I'll check this save changes if destructive. Then I would validate this synchronize option. If I have not filled out any option or some of the options from this options page, it will show me what the problem is and in which parameter the problem is. Once it has been validated properly, I can either create a new step, or if I just want to add one step, I can click OK. For now, after performing synchronization, I want to perform a GTP also, so I'll click new again. Do you want to save the current new step? Yes, I do. Now as you can see, the first step has been added. First macro step has been added to go expense contributor sync GTP macro. After this first step, I want to perform a go to production. Now I have two options to do that. I can either select go to production, or I can directly give the address of some other macro. This shows you the concept of reusability of the existing macros. So to explain this reusability, I'll rather select an option where I can execute a macro. Under macros, I can see execute macro. I'll click OK. Now the execute macro page will show me all the existing macros. I'll select go to production, click OK, validate it again, and then OK. Now a couple of things to remember. You can see the macro has been created. If the edit state is complete, only then you can initiate a macro or you can run a macro. If edit state is not complete, you cannot run a macro. The edit state incomplete suggests that you have not properly set all the options of a macro or a macro step. Run state shows ready, and if I execute this macro, it will first synchronize and then it will run another macro, that is go to production. So this is the way that we create a macro in CAC. Hope this helps.